Welcome to the Credit Union Sales and Marketing Podcast. Your hosts, Bill McKenna, Paul Robert, and special guests discuss ideas for creating alignment in your sales and marketing efforts and ways to accelerate growth. Now let's get started.
Paul, I thought today what we do, we've been going through these steps of branding and these steps of what it looks like to create a new brand and culture and all that good stuff. And, I thought I'd start off with the dirty word today that a lot of credit unions talk about. And that word is sales, right? Oh, yeah, the sales word.
Yeah.
So, I don't think anything happens today without somebody selling something. You have to sell something, right? But the word we hear in the industry is more of the educational approach or the consultative approach, or, we hear a lot about service in this industry. But let's take a minute and let's talk about sales. You and I were talking offline a little bit about a experience you're having with a client of yours. Why don't you tell us about what's happening there?
Yeah, Bill, your comment about sales being a dirty word. I've been working with credit unions for over 20 years, and it's amazing the lengths that they've gone to come up with a different word, or a different way of saying it. And it's been all over the board. And so I was talking about that with a chief lending officer at a credit union who was relatively new to the credit union, but came from the brokerage industry. And so when you talk about the spectrum, right, on a sales standpoint, he was way over here. Credit unions are way over here. And, he acknowledged that, but he said, we need to be somewhere in the middle. And there's a lot we can learn from the sales industry or other industries that are heavily into sales. And he said, that's where we need to be. We need to take some of what they do and incorporate it into some of the things you talked about: service, education, deepening relationships. All of those things are critical, no question about it. But if there isn't a sales step that's taken, we're only going to be partially successful in our efforts. So I think we really need to become more salesy, even though it's a dirty word.
Yeah, I totally agree. And obviously what we're really trying to do as credit unions is we're trying to create value in people's lives, right? We always say no one wants to be sold to. None of us like to be sold to. But the truth is that sometimes we have to be able to show the value in what we're doing, the benefits of what we're doing. If people don't understand that, why they should do business with you compared to the bank or whatever, they're not going to do anything. But we have to relate to them in a way that makes sense to them and where they're coming from.
And here's the difference, Bill. I agree with you that people don't like to be sold to, but here's the caveat. If it's better for you, if it's a great opportunity for you, heck yeah, I want to be sold to. Tell me about that product or that service where I should have my money or I should be spending my time or whatever the case may be. I don't know financial products like my trusted advisor, quote unquote, at the credit union does. So I'm counting on you to tell me about the products that are going to put me in a better position. So in that scenario, I want to be sold to, And in fact, I was brought up in an environment, a heavy sales environment, where, we were told that if you don't tell your member about a certain product or service that can help them, you're committing malpractice.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't think we think about that enough, because as soon as we hear the word sales, Bill, our mind immediately goes to a used car salesman, right? And I don't mean to offend used car salesmen. I know a few of them myself, but that's the connotation of sales. And it's so far removed from what we're trying to accomplish with credit unions. But nonetheless, it's a hurdle that we have to overcome, and we just got to get comfortable with selling.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when you said get comfortable, that's a conversation we have all the time. And I know you have that a lot, especially because a lot of people aren't comfortable with selling. They aren't comfortable with the process and what it looks like. And here's the other thing. They haven't been trained in that process, and they don't understand what tools to use to get those conversations. They're so focused, especially at the teller line, for instance, they're so focused on getting that member in and out that Anything after that becomes
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't have time for that, or I don't have the tools for that. So shame on us if
Yeah.
we don't provide the tools and the leadership they need to be better job at selling. And that's not just in the credit union, but we also
Yeah.
talked about outside the credit union, out in the community, right?
Out in the community. Yep. 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 I mean, just think about it. You're at a social event, or maybe you're at a Thanksgiving dinner or something, and somebody says to you, "Hey, don't you work at XYZ Credit Union?" How are you going to respond to that? Or, certainly if you're at a community event, you may already have the logo shirt on, so they wouldn't ask that question, but they might ask, what is XYZ Credit Union? Or, maybe why should I bring my accounts to you? Or what can you do for me that my current financial institution isn't doing for me? I challenge our listeners and our viewers, Bill, how many of your employees could answer those questions quickly and succinctly and effectively? And, I think for the ones that haven't been through a process like we're describing here, very few of them would be able to answer that. Hey, let me tag on one
Yeah.
thing that you said a moment ago about people not feeling comfortable with sales. You know who I have found is the most uncomfortable with sales in a credit union? The CEO many times. A lot of times it's the CEO, maybe it's the next level down, but they're the ones that are setting the standard for no sales. We're not even going to use that word, blah, 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 blah. Well, do you have to grow, Mr. and Mrs. CEO? Oh, yeah, we got to grow. But, that's marketing's job. We're not going to become a sales organization. Well, as you and I are here to prove, it has to be a 1-2 punch, doesn't it?
It definitely does. And boy, we could go on, I think, this entire podcast talking about this stuff because this is something we deal with all the time. And the leadership in the institution needs to get it. And if they're not comfortable with that, then they need to have the right people around them, which I'm so excited to see that so many credit unions have added positions like a chief experience officer or
Right.
someone who's in charge of, because they know that's not their strength. They may be great at managing money. However, having said that, there are a lot of CEOs now in this industry that come from a marketing background, which is also very cool because they know that sometimes it takes a marketing mind or a visionary to create that idea, right? And get that through. But everybody has to be on the same page, and it is a process. So let's talk for a second about what we call a value proposition or a slogan or a tagline. And there's a full spectrum of how you go about to do this, right? We've seen
Right.
some people who sort of do a contest on it and they always take that one. And then we've seen people that spend a tremendous amount of money on research and, and focus group studies and surveys and to figure out, is that the perfect word? Is that the perfect one? And there's something in between there or a bunch of things. So the value proposition is important because you're going to use it as a statement to kind of launch that conversation and those deliverables, right? We're going to use that as the base. But let's talk about that for a minute. What's that look like and how do you go about it and maybe some of the thoughts on it?
Yeah, let's go back to that scenario that I put out there about being at a community event. That's where you would start in answering that question. Let me proudly tell you who we are. And so that gets to my second point, Bill, which is that value proposition really has to be organic. It can't be something that you plagiarize from somebody else, or you just put a bunch of words out there and try to form them into a catchy phrase. No, it's got to be something that comes from the heart, comes from the soul of your culture and your organization. And so that value proposition really is at the center of marketing, promoting who we are. It's also at the center of selling and helping a member or prospective member understand why they should do business with you versus all the other guys out there.
It makes total sense. It makes total. And if you remember in our very first podcast, I told my apple pie story, which is always a favorite. But the truth is, it's what I said. It's like it's not one thing. When you make an apple pie, all those ingredients make a great apple pie. If you leave some of them out and they're not aligned, it's not going to be great. That's what we're talking about here. When we talk about brand development, we're talking about a lot of pieces that must align and a lot of thoughts. So getting back to value proposition, there's a few things there that I've identified, and maybe we could just, well, let me hit on the first one. It's short and sweet. Typically, it has to be short and sweet, easy to memorize, easy, and make some sense. So I've found the best ones many times are a short, sweet statement, maybe even 3 words with periods between them, but they have to be something quick and easy. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And because they're short and sweet, it's something that is maybe on the wall in the branch that where you're talking to the member, and you can point to it and say, hey, let me explain what those 3 words mean to us and what we want them to mean to you. So yeah, absolutely, it's got to be short and sweet.
And I always say, what's it say about you? So that, in a succinct way, what does it say about you as you develop? That's one we talk about all the time. Another one there is it real?
Right.
That's an interesting one.
It is, and I would add to that, Bill. Is it real and is it sincere? Are we truly living this value proposition? Are we truly substantiating our brand with our actions? And this is far outside of credit union land. We can think of a lot of examples of businesses that say one thing as part of their value prop, but they do something totally different. And it's like, I'm not going to do business with those people because they're lying about who they are. So yes, it's got to be real and it's got to be sincere as well.
Yeah, and you can't just pick something out of a hat and say, this is it now, let's talk about it. It's not going to work because people will see right through it. Another thought there is must be delivered each day by everyone. That's what we talked about. It has to be a true value statement that means something, and it takes a lot of work for everyone to deliver that same message. You said it. I often talk about it when I do a SWOT analysis with someone, which I know you do some of that too. I say, if I went up and asked Susie the teller, and if I asked someone in the back office, and I tell me, in a succinct way why your credit union's different. Many of them are going to say service. And we know we've touched on that before. That is not something that makes you different. Great service is expected. So it has to be delivered. And there's a lot to that, right, Paul? Getting through that process of the training and the culture.
You mentioned in a previous episode about the brand camp that we do, which is a workshop where we work with every employee, not just the member-facing employees, but the non-member-facing employees, the execs, everybody in the organization goes through brand camp. And in a nutshell, Bill, it's answering the question, how do you live our brand, or how do you live our value proposition day in and day out with every member you interact with and or every teammate that you interact with? And when you boil it down to that level, we talked a few moments ago about how it's got to be at the core of everything you do and how it's got to be genuine and organic. Man, it really gets real when we boil it down to that level and we start working with employees on, this has got to come from the heart. This has got to be part of the fabric of who you are and what your culture is and so forth. So, yeah, it's got to be delivered by everybody. It's got to be sustainable. It's not something that we do sometimes and not other times. And it's not something we're going to change every year when we do strategic planning. This is universal and this is constant as we move forward.
And you can see when brands have taken the time to do this, and you can see that in the financial services. You could see that in the Chick-fil-A's of the world. You could see that when an organization understands what this is about. And I believe today more than ever that, hey, products and services are products and services. Financial services, rates and fees, we all have them, right? Yep. But the thing that's going to make us stand out is the way we deliver that day to day, what makes us different, and how also we relate to the community or the members we serve our field of membership. We cannot be all things to all people. We have to understand who we're serving, and that brand has got to be built around that. There's a lot involved there. Again, this is a great conversation. We could talk for hours.
Well, let me say one more thing, and then I'll shut up, Bill.
I didn't ask you to, by the way, I didn't ask you to shut up. I wouldn't do that on the podcast necessarily.
I used to say that if you blindfolded somebody and took them into a financial institution and took the blindfold off, the question is, would you be able to tell what type of financial institution they're in? Now, 20 years ago, banks traditionally were the more stuffy, they had the marble on the floors, et cetera, et cetera. That's not true anymore. I mean, credit unions and banks look and feel very much the same way. You alluded to the fact that our products and services are virtually identical. Maybe there's a few slight nuances, but generally speaking, for 80% of the consumers out there, they are the same. Well, what is going to differentiate us? What can we hang our hat on? The only thing we can, Bill, is our brand and how we live that brand day in and day out. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was recently having a conversation with James Robert Lay, who's respected in this industry. He's been around for a while, is Digital Growth Institute, and he has a book called Banking on Digital Growth. And so him and I were having a conversation on LinkedIn, and he had some good thoughts. I appreciated his feedback, and they actually touched me because I realized there needs to be a commitment, right? So what he said, which was interesting in his reply to me on LinkedIn, was he said awareness plus commitment equals transformation. So you have to have the awareness and you have to be committed to that. And that's how transformation. Now, the second one, awareness alone does not create transformation, just awareness. We may know we have a problem, but just awareness isn't going to create transformation. And the next part, commitment alone does not create transformation, right? It's all of them together. So we have to be able to understand the importance of what we're talking about here, Paul. People and organizations have to be committed to building a strong, sustainable brand. If they do not, they're going to be like every other FI, and they're not going to be able to really serve a member the most effectively. Obviously, one of the focuses in James' business is banking on digital transformation. That's a whole nother conversation, but we know also that the member experience, the ability to do things seamlessly today, is becoming more and more important, right? We know the importance of technology. So that's another conversation for another podcast, but we certainly have to respect the fact that people want things to be seamless today. Much more so than in the past.
So our next podcast, I think we're going to talk about brand deliverables. So that falls into that. One other thing I'll tag on to that, Bill, and then we better run, is that I think a lot of consumers today want to do business with companies, and in our case, our audience here, credit unions, who are different, who do stand out, who do have a powerful and impressive brand and a memorable brand for all the positive reasons that we've annotated here. So I think that it's a great differentiator, and it's also a great selling point to be able to talk proudly about your brand and how you stand out from all those other financial institutions.
I agree with that totally. So, hey, a good conversation today. I always enjoy talking with you about this stuff, and certainly we live this each day of our lives as part of what we do for our clients. So, hey, it was great. It was great talking to you today. And let's jump back on for the next one. Step 5, we're going to talk about brand deliverables, digging a little bit deeper about the creation of those and some of those thoughts. So I'll catch you next time on the Credit Union Sales and Marketing Podcast, Paul.